Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the FinTech Asia Token Bytes podcast. I'm delighted to have SheueChee, who is the Senior Vice President at Yuno, as well as the head of APAC, joining us today. SheueChee, how are you doing?
Fantastic, Shade. It's been a really great Chinese New Year break for me, and now heading back full force, growing the business here for and very much looking forward for our conversations today. Especially, you told me that we're going to talk about the future of payment, and it's really
Yes.
near and dear to my heart. Yeah.
Yeah, Gongshi Fachai. And, it's a roaring start to the year of the wooden snake. And
Yeah.
I hope you've had a good break and getting back to work from this week onwards. Thanks so much
Yep.
for taking out time to be with us here. As you've said, the future of payments, for me, payments has always been this fascinating world. I come more from the capital markets, trading side of things. And I keep thinking payments is saturated, innovation is done, and every other week you see a new player coming in and more people getting into it. So now I've come to terms with it. But we would love to hear about your journey. How did you get into payments? What have you been doing? I know the role with is relatively recent. So before that, what was your key career path and journey?
Yeah, I think when you are speaking with people in payments, most of us will be the answer will be I stumbled into the industry. Well,
Sure.
right,
Yeah.
there isn't a subject that we learn when we were young. If looking back in the university, like hey, I want to be a
Sure.
payment evangelist or I want to be a payment expert. No, it is really not the case, and payments ties very closely with fintech. So then I'll bring
Sure.
it a little bit back to 20 years ago or even before that. I've been stumbled into the payment industry 20 plus years ago.
Sure.
And what I wanted to say is payments, it exists since decades, since commerce actually exists, right?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Barter systems, and then you have travel checks, you have credit card, like physical card, you get coins, you
Yeah.
get all sort of things. So whenever there's commerce, there is payments happening. So because it's
Correct.
so, inbuilt in day to days of our life, we never really think about how it happens. And what we always wanted as a consumer is it has to happen in seconds, right? If I'm waiting for
Sure.
2 or 3 seconds, we'll all shout and complain like
Mm.
why this is not working and transaction is not working. But having said that, fintech has been something that we always think about, and Visa and MasterCard was really the origin OG of the payments, right? In digital payments, I would say. So 20
Sure.
years ago, I started with Thesis Global Payments, and today, we Thesis is still serving the customers and issuers and the acquirers. When we say issuers and acquirers, is people who issue the card and the
Mhm.
merchants who accept the cards, right? So they are serving at the back end of the systems, the engine to issue the cards. So that is where I start from. Then I move on to NTT Data and also a couple of similar kind of software at the back end into merchants and into PSP. That is where PSP started to get very popular. So NTT Data, they built the national switch in Japan, and they are really trying to compete with the like of Visa and MasterCard in terms of setting up the infrastructures in processing cards and payments. So what you
Sure.
see is like, although they are issuing a Visa card and MasterCard, but within the country itself, all the transactions are processed by the national switch, which is predominantly it's processed by NTT Data as a national switch. And then I was part of this e-commerce change where we are trying to acquire a couple of PSP outside of Japan. So that is the first global expansion and experience that I have from POS terminal, which is the offline, we call it offline merchant, into the online. And then I move on into JP Morgan. I was part of the merchant acquiring business development teams. I
Sure.
heads up the business developments to really bring the big merchants from the US, the like of like Netflix, Google, Amazon's, into Asia Pacifics, and how to make payments work for all this kind of e-commerce. So I
Mm-hmm.
was there a couple of I think 18 months, and then Uber actually for and Uber's was looking for a head of payment in Asia Pacific. So I've been
Okay.
always in the provider end, and now
Yeah.
it gives me another perspective of looking from the merchant's perspective. So it is really like my career moving from the very back end, going
Yeah.
into more and more consumer facing. And interestingly, I am taking care of the payments acceptance and also the
Yeah.
disbursement of the payment and the compliance when I was there. And because of that, then I see the both side of the story of the payments. And also with
Yeah.
the experience that I have in JP Morgan, I am having a different perspective. Like payment, it is not just we are talking about Visa and MasterCard. We are talking about real-time payment. We are talking about transactional banking and things like that. So it's really a fascinating journey for me. And today, having Yuno, what exactly is Yuno and why Yuno? It's a payment orchestrator. And the payment orchestrator is a new term that is coming out only in
Mhm.
the recent years, and I'm
Yeah.
looking forwards to see that how can payment orchestrator change the payment landscape a little bit. So like you say, Shed, you've been hearing payments here, payments there, you thought everything is done, but there are still new things coming up every single other day. Yeah.
I'm very fascinated with that journey you've had, right? You started with a multinational and large firms, and you've gone, as you've said, different elements. So from looking at the traditional payment providers, sort
Mm.
of operators on one side now with but also working with large giants, if I may use the term. And JP Morgan is the world's largest
Yeah.
bank in many aspects. And
Yeah.
then, of course, on the payment side of Uber, right?
It's
It's
one
it's
of
what
its
makes it
kind,
run.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great mix of. Uh, how did you manage to kind of journey through this? What is like navigate through different aspects of it, right? Some people tend to be specialist in one vertical alone, right?
Yep.
Whereas
Yep.
some can be more can specialize across verticals or move across verticals. I think would be lovely to understand how you have managed those transitions or taken on those roles, switching from one style or one element to another. Yeah.
Yeah, I think all in all, as you can see, my I still stick with payments in general, although it is a different facet of the payments, and you can see that all this is still the journey of how the transaction is being transpired whenever we
Mm.
do a real payments like touch pay or whatever, right? It is just the medium has changed, the technology has advanced, but I'm still within the payment ecosystems. That is number one. And number two, other than payments, I don't think I'm expert in any other thing. So, so the things that I really passionate about is when I get an opportunity to deep dive and pay attention to the details of what is happening when payments happen. So today, I was just talking about traveler checks, and then we
Mm.
have credit cards, and then we have debit card, and then we have wallets, and now we have pay by palm, pay by
Yeah.
nails, pay by your face, and stuff like that, right? This
Yeah.
is all changing. Pay by is wearable, and
Yeah.
I would have to say the core, the fundamental of the my knowledge does not change. It is
Mm.
just creativity and having a lot of conversations with different parties to basically stitch them all together. And that
Sure.
that is why I find that my value, it's really about attention to the details and follow the money, right? So when
Mm.
I say follow the
Literally. Yeah.
money,
Yeah.
it's why
Yeah.
answering to your question, why there are so many payments company being born left, right, center, is because I do think many of them are following the money and the revenues that being captured based on the gaps. And then I have built a lot of a great network and community where we constantly talk about innovative ways that I share with you. What is next? What is next? And we constantly have come up with a lot of very interesting use case to train or to actually educate the consumer in the change of their behavior from using an actual credit card to today contactless, or in the future it will really about payments by biometrics. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear, right? And I think that's a key to keeping is that a upskilling yourself in terms of building the knowledge is not just about having that narrow focus. It's good to have that build and expertise, but also being aware of what's happening around, because there's always interconnectivity in what we do. And the way
Yeah.
technology is developing, like you mentioned travelers checks, and I was thinking, yeah, that used to be the case that if you wanted to travel internationally, you would carry travelers check. You very rarely,
Yes.
because FX was such a challenge in a lot of the global south to get access to US dollars or euros or GBP. Travelers
Mm.
checks were what you used to go pay, and people accepted
Yep.
that, right? That was and credit cards weren't as common in most of emerging Asia, if not most of the global south, right? I mean, even in China and India, the limits were so low that you can't really go and actually use those internationally. So yeah, it's just and that's that evolution that you've had. And I'm
Yeah.
just building on this. You are a woman in payments, a woman leader in payments. Are there any tips you would like to give aspiring young ladies who are looking to build a career in payments about how to approach this and how they can build a profile and grow in the industry without having to worry about the other challenges that they may encounter? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, yesterday I attended one of my very good friend. She wrote a book. She is an economist, and she wrote a book about female digital evolutions, and how we can encourage females to be coming into the industry where they are not familiar with. So she shared
Uh,
with me this story about someone who is learning finance and accounting came up to her and asked that, am I studying the wrong things, because everyone seems to be in the digital, and my friend is in data science, in digital, in computer science, but I'm in finance and accounting. Am I going to get no
Absolutely.
future
Yeah.
with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the thing is, we are trying to show these young people, especially regardless of female and male, to really change the mindsets to be much more open mindset and see that what you can do by showing them and inspire them. Why I'm saying that is there is always, especially in Asia, we have this concept about, okay, if it is a pilot, it's usually the man. If it is a engineering and data and computer science, is the woman, is the man and not the woman. But we are
Yeah.
not saying that we do not need. We are discounting the man or things like that. We are just trying to let them know the possibility of all these things that we are doing has got nothing to do with gender. It has
Yeah.
got something to do with your growth mindset. Whether you want to learn, you want to take on the challenge, do you have the right network, and have you reached out to the right network to learn things like that? I was just talking to my husband, it's like, why most of the politicians are the male? Why the investment is the male? And oftentimes, female doesn't have that concept and thought, because growing up we see usually it's the father who is doing it, not the mother. But if I can show more females and the younger generation, and even like yourself, if you have a daughter, you can show them that female can also come into the industry. I think that is the critical turning points to encourage them to be in the workforce, to be also learning these things, so that they will be given the opportunity in the technical, in fintech, in any area that they are not. So for me personally, I'm a big advocate. I have been always in the women's in payments, advocating for women's, trying to help them to grow their career and give them the opportunity and the bullets for them to grow as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think having role models is very important, right? Be it
Yeah.
women or men or young ladies, it is
Mm.
an important element. And in fintech, there's always this, finance typically more male dominated, tech even more so male
More.
dominated or skewed
Yeah.
towards that. And then when you bring them together, it becomes like how challenging. But we as FinStep Asia had done a report for the Financial Alliance for Women about 4 years ago, which is looking at how fintechs are catering to women users, right? And what we
Mm.
discovered was a lot of times there is, gender disaggregated data as an issue, but when it came to careers and roles, it all boiled down to how the approach was, because it wasn't, there's no lacking in talent. In fact, when I grew up, most of the people who were the toppers in my class or around me used to be women or girls, right, at that stage, at the age they were. So it
Yeah.
is the capabilities. There's just about sometimes stereotyping too much about men needing to do it, but there's a lot of women who
Yeah.
can do it. But it's
Yeah.
also important to have their participation, because when products are built, a lot of times you see that these products are built by men, right?
You're
So
right. Yeah.
and they're building it from their usage perspective, and then it
Yeah.
becomes a self-fulfilling spiral, I call it, right? So then you're not because women tend to take a little more time to get onboarded, want to understand the product, but they're more
Yep.
loyal. They have more returns as a for a company in the longer term, right? So I think that's an
Yeah.
important element. If you have more women getting involved in the technical side, product development,
Yeah.
all of these, you can then build better products. And talking about products, now that you've been in for a few months, have had
Yeah.
your the time to sink in your teeth, as they say, right? Probably. What have you discovered? Tell us about and what are the plans for APAC?
Yeah, so we were talking about this product, right? And I was
Yeah.
thinking that what is next for payments? So in payments, you will hear a lot of these players, and these players is typically Adyen, Stripe,
Mhm.
Checkout.com, or you will
Yeah.
hear Visa, Mastercard, Amex, and this company, it is part of the payments, I would say, because they are typically on the we call it accepting the money from, if you're doing any businesses at all, right? If you're running a
Yeah.
marketplace, you're running a website, you're selling anything, gaming, whatever, it is always about collecting the money. But
Yeah.
when you are collecting the money today and going forwards in the next decades, I will see that there will a lot of other platforms coming in where they are connecting the buyer and the seller. Right? So when they are
Yeah.
connecting the buyer and the seller, usually a platform will have to collect the money and then they will also have to pay out the money.
Correct. Yeah.
And when you are really imagining tomorrow, in this interconnecting world, everyone is selling to everyone. Like everyone is selling to everyone from one country. For example, Upwork and Fiverr, right? You have all these people coming from across the world trying to put themselves up and sell their skills. They can be teaching English from
Mhm.
Philippines. They can be teaching Spanish from Latin America. And then the learner can be from South Africa, can be from Middle East, can be from anywhere. And then when you are really looking at all this kind of platform, it is being born, what
Yeah.
exactly needs to happen is the movement of the money and the product
Sure.
that is built to cater for this kind of business going forward has to also give the options back to the merchants to be able to collect from everywhere in the world and also to pay out to everywhere in the world as well. So
Correct.
therefore,
Yeah.
it comes into a marketplace model, and is a platform. It is connecting all the players that can help you to collect across the world and also to pay out to your to your supplier across the world. So that is
Yeah.
where the the whole marketplace of is born, e-commerce marketplace, and the movement of money and the complexity of moving the money with multi-currency, multi-providers, different customers experience, user experience. Like in Hong
Hmm.
Kong, you need to use pay me or something like that, and then
Yeah.
in Singapore I have Pay Now, and then in India I have UPI. But this kind of cross-border payment is where it becomes fascinating, it becomes complex, and it becomes like still a lot of problems for us to solve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, it's very true, right? You're moving towards a world where there are many micro entrepreneurs, right? And they're all
exactly.
freelancers in some senses, working out of different parts. The digital nomad entrepreneurs as well, and that's one part of it.
Exactly.
But it's generally it's a more connected world for sure in terms of payments. And so, what are the vision for APAC? What are you looking to build upon? Yeah.
Yeah, so what I'm really, really looking forward to build upon, and I do things like tools is just a tools, a platform is a platforms. It
So
has to really have the strategies to really implement properly into selling into the countries and also
hmm
help the merchants to expand to the particular regions that you are expanding to. So
yeah.
what you know is all about, it's really bringing the merchants from Latin America, from America, coming into Asia Pacific so that they can also target the consumers over here or the seller in this part of the world selling goods into that part of the world. So that is the interconnections that we are trying to offer. Of course, the platform and the tools comes with the advisory and with the deep expertise of my teams over here. We will bring that to the merchant. So that is the inbound that we're talking about. Now we also talk about outbound. In Asia Pacific, there are so many big merchants it's selling across to the entire world. A good
hmm
example is like Shein, right? Like
Yeah.
Canva, it is in this part of the world. They are also selling towards everywhere. And oftentimes, it is extremely difficult if you don't have a pathway to understand if I am building in Malaysia, I want to sell to India. What is the India's users look like? What do they like
hmm
in terms of their language, in terms of how they want to pay? And it really make or break each and every transactions of the sales that is coming in from there. So, is really serving the merchants coming into Asia Pacific. We will provide the advisory to them when they come to this part of the world. And then we are also bringing the merchants from this part of the world growing globally. So that is where we want to be. And in addition to that, for me personally, I'd also want to raise a lot more awareness and educations that payment is not just an enabler. If you have done it right, you will see that why Amazon has Amazon Pay, why
Yeah.
Google has Google Pay. There must be a reasons why they are holding the money and how the money is flowing, and that is the opportunity. And FX is part of it. So
Yeah.
working with the right partners, having the tech, having the consultations and strategy, it's really very, very important for marketplace, especially when they're selling across the world to be successful. Yeah.
And it's just interesting you mentioned about e-commerce, right? And you look at the largest in, say, Greater China and East Asia, one sense, in terms of
Yeah.
Alipay, right?
Yeah.
Arguably the largest, latest number I don't have, but they were born out of the necessity to facilitate payment for the e-commerce. That it wasn't, born out of wanting to do payments. It was how do we get people to have faster access for payments and be able to, for
Yeah.
merchants, to get the money without
The
being,
money. Yeah.
without being
Because
scammed or
when we
losses. Yeah.
really talk about business, right, what do? We want the money to come into
Yeah.
where we want to be. And then, even personally, you and me, we need to also understand that sometimes I'm talking about in a very layman term. What are we using when we are traveling? We often will
Sure.
only go with credit card because that is the
Yeah.
only way that we know how to do it. But we don't know that actually there might be a better solutions out there going forward in the future. That's why there's stable coins coming in, there's crypto coming in. And why all this happen is because more and more people is raising the awareness. Okay, if you are using credit card, you are being charged the FX rate, and the FX
Correct.
is
Yeah.
never great, right?
Right.
Even though we get a little bit of rebate here and there, but someone has to fund the
The
FX and
effects. Yeah.
someone is
Yeah.
making the money with the FX. And that is why I think like being a consumer ourselves, we should also be looking at how much we are really paying, and we can save, or we can actually use them to build a better financial literacy even for ourselves. Yeah.
Fair. The small point on credit cards where often people aren't aware whether to choose the local currency or home currency, and most people choose
Yeah,
the home currency, which actually then ends up losing more in FX than if you choose the
exactly.
local currency as such. And that's actually a good
Yeah.
segue when we're talking about trends, right? To
Mm.
ask you from your expectations in terms of key payment trends you're seeing or expecting over, say, the next year or two. What are you seeing and what do you expect will grow in the coming year or so? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just actually writing down some of the things that are talking about the payments. So one of them is a really real-time payments,
Mm-hmm.
cross-border real-time payments. So we
Sure.
were just talking about credit card being one of the most expensive cross-border payments when even you
Yeah.
and I are buying or selling, right? So real-time payments, because a lot of initiatives are being done by BIS, the
Yeah.
International Settlement
Innovation
Bank,
Hub.
yeah, and then Project Nexus and things like
Correct.
that to really find ways to have a cheaper, quicker, safer options for all of us. So real-time payment is one of them. Number two is financial inclusions as well. Like people, when we are really talking about credit cards, some countries just don't have the people are not really educated to hey, I just want to go in depth or
Mm.
I just want to have credit card because like India, right? A really really good example when I'm talking to my interns, they said like yeah, credit card is not a great things to have because you might go into the depths and things like that. So they
Yeah.
are being educated only from that perspective. Then when they are traveling, what can they use? Which is financial inclusions of all these people who are not cards user as well. Yeah, and also
Yeah.
including things like stablecoin that I was just talking about. I
Yeah.
think it is still, I wouldn't say early stage. The adoption is getting there. The knowledge is getting there. People are less reluctant to talk about it, or even like crypto or things like that. People starting to learn and expose
Mhm.
themselves into that. And then we are also talking about AI, right? AI and
Yes. Yeah.
payments is always together. And Yuno is implementing lots and lots of AI technologies in terms of people have been always talking about using AI for fraud detections, using
Yeah.
AI for this and that. In Yuno, we are heavily invested into AI to really study all the data and the transactions that we are processing to be able to optimize how to increase the approval rates as well, in addition to the fraud and
Mhm.
chargeback rates, right? Like I said, the successful transactions will bring revenues to the merchants, and therefore having to route into the right provider, the PSP or the acquiring bank, you will raise the acceptance of your sales, so increase the sales of the merchant. So we're using a lot of AI technologies to route according to pricing, according to
Yeah.
the authentications rate, authorizations rates, and things like that. And so AI is definitely one of the things. So payments, speaking of which, earlier you asked me like what makes me stick into the industry and into different point of view from merchants to provider. It's really about you will always see that whenever there are new technology, payments will be part of it. Like AI is part of it. Like
Sure.
blockchains is also into payments. And therefore, it keeps people interesting and the growth is always there. And also, of course, we are talking about various industry. All the industry will have to move money. And therefore, it is an industry that we will say it pays well. It also keep you passionate
Mhm.
and interesting to grow. So that is something that we're talking about. And then lastly, I would like to also talk about embedded finance, right? Uber
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
big in embedded finance, and embedded finance is one of the very, very good way to educate your users how payments work. So let me give
Yeah.
you an example. One of the financial product that we can launch for the driver is issuing a debit card for them so that we can pay out to them on trip disbursement, meaning like when they
Mhm.
finish a trip, they'll be able to get their money
That's right.
immediately. Yeah. So this kind of innovative things, it is happening, and it is actually within the embedded finance. And with that, the driver using the platform, they will be able to learn what exactly how to use a debit card, how to use a credit card, and how to facilitate wallets and things like that. So in a way, embedded finance is also shaping how the consumer pay going forward. Yeah,
The great points, right? This is a lot about how technology is changing user
yeah,
behavior and both, users, right? So you are
yeah,
creating newer users, new forms of users, and then you need enablement for that. Some of
yeah.
these are so well explained by you. I just wanted to take a little bit of double click on both the stablecoin story as well as use of AI, right?
Yes.
Where do you see the ecosystem largely from a technical perspective on readiness, right? So as you
Mm.
rightly said, I mean, look, Bitcoin started 16 years ago, 17 years ago, largely as a, a product or a service that was peer-to-peer,
Yeah.
bypassing intermediaries for payments, right? So that you don't have a banking intermediary or a payment intermediary, and there's no reliance on FX, etc., and it's your worth, blah blah, right? And now
Mm.
we've seen the stablecoins take that role from Bitcoin in
Yep.
terms of saying, okay, we'll facilitate that payment, and there's a bunch of stuff, and with regulations like in Singapore, like in Hong Kong, and now being proposed in the US as well, and Mike already has this in Europe. You now have financial institutions actively getting in from the big
Yep.
names like Visa, Mastercard, etc. So my question here is: yes, you have the facilitators, the regulators ready with it, but
Yep.
from merchants to intermediaries and others, where do we stand in technical readiness, right? Or is that
Yep.
even going to be necessary because of the likes? Some of the bigger names in payment processing have started incorporating stable coins as another currency, as it were, right? So the end
Yeah,
user doesn't feel
exactly.
it. But I would love to hear your thoughts on first on the stablecoin readiness, and
Yep.
the second is in terms of AI itself, when that's being used, what is the explainability and understandability for end users or end customers? Let's say not end users, end customers,
Mm.
on like the accuracy as they're aware of the AI per se. Yeah.
Wow, this too, it's a very, very, very a challenging topic, I would say,
Sure.
because the adoptions is still not there. A lot of
Yeah.
people are still trying to find a real use case because whatever idea that we have, right? If there is no real use case that you find it useful, typically it will die down fairly quickly. Yeah.
Correct.
So use case is the things that we are always thinking about. And in terms of stablecoin, how does the infrastructure stack up, and who is playing a role in that? Recently, you see that Stripe is also into a stable
Correct.
coins, and then you will see that JP Morgan is also has a JPM coin, which is also another stable coin. PayPal is
Correct.
also doing that.
Yeah.
So what is the problems that everyone is trying to solve? As you imagine, a couple of years ago, if we are literally transferring money from London to New York, flying, you take a bag of money and fly there, will arrive there faster than you do a TT transfer,
Correct.
literally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So the real use case is really like telling people and educating the general in the layman term to understand stablecoin is to facilitate a faster, cheaper, and more secured way of transferring your money from cross-border payments. So I think going from that perspective, it will be easier to have investor to understand because you need investments money to really come in order to make this work. And therefore, if the investor doesn't understand, or the venture capital or private equity does not understand what you are trying to solve, oftentimes you don't get the investment money to
Mm.
continuously doing that. So first of all, come up with a actual use case, and then find a few merchants who is doing this cross border and prove that business case that it works. And we have taken a long time for stablecoin to come to where we are today, and we do see
Yeah.
like, hey, actually there are some use case, and therefore more and more people are going into the game. So we are still very new in the game. There's still a lot of awareness and understanding on the real use case that I was sharing with you, really to achieve faster and cheaper option. Also, stable coins is for, like interconnected countries and the commerce world. There are so many restricted currencies in so many part of the world, and that is the actual problem, that why stablecoin is gaining a lot more popularity and awareness right now. It's really about cash trap in certain countries. If you
Yeah.
can't take the money out, you don't have a business, and therefore the use case is surfacing a lot more now. People have the understanding, okay, stablecoin is for this usage, and therefore a little bit lesser of pushback instead of
Yeah.
moving forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is
No,
on the
no, no.
stablecoin
On
side.
stablecoin side, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
On
on
the
AI,
AI.
go on, please. Yeah.
Yes, AI. So AI, embedded finance and things like that is really about education. Again, it's awareness and educations. Okay, so today a lot of fraudster has been using AI to scam and to do the
Correct.
things. At the same time, we as players in the payments, we are also using AI to fight all this fraudster. So
Sure.
on the cybersecurity side, so that is a very layman understanding on how AI is being implemented into the fraud. Really, it is about training a lot of data and using all these data to make decisions whether the transactions that we are trying to transact is secured or insecure. It is a fraud or it's going to be a refund or chargeback. So that is one point of it. On the AI, another thing is that it will be more relevant to the business, less so on the consumer. It's the decisions on how to route transactions when it hits into your website. Okay, so what
Sure.
I'm saying that is we collect a lot of data, and when we are doing a smart routing, we need to make a decision fairly quickly on where to route to, who to route to, and which kind of processor I should be working with based on the promotional periods that I have with the PSP, right? So
Yeah.
I will have that. And then interchange fees, if you're familiar with interchange fee, Visa and MasterCard often have a very complex interchange fees that we need to understand. And then you will
Yeah.
have to use the historical data to help you to make a new decisions like who and where you should be routing the transaction to. Should you route to Stripe? Should you route to JP Morgan? Should you route to Ardian? So all this
Mm-hmm.
kind of complexity is there. Of course, medium, mid-size, small, medium merchants, they will be only having Stripe. But like I said, Yuno is a platform where we give the options back to the merchants. The merchants should be able to have the flexibility to choose whether they want to work with UPI provider like Razorpay, or they want to work with Visa or Master or Amex or whatsoever, right? So giving the options using AI as a tools to help them to make a decisions who is the best provider to work with when the consumer sitting in Hong Kong is making that transaction. And you can see, like, you sit in Hong Kong, I sit in Singapore, somebody sits in somebody else in the world. How does all these transactions being routed is where AI come into play. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great explanation. I think the element of using Gen AI as an almost a team of agents. I mean, I'm using
Exactly.
the
Yeah.
term, right? Who are going to essentially find the best path forward for you, and then as Uno, you are providing that
Yes.
to the end consumer. So that helps. So that's where I think there's going to be a lot of scalability in some senses, where you have newer things that can be done, which aren't
Mm.
necessarily replacing people, but actually enabling more productivity gains, efficiency, and
Yep.
options
Yeah,
as we
and
grow. And yeah,
options. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, and really helping the payment strategies to make a better decisions, and therefore we are increase the effectivity of efficiency of routing the transactions to make it safer for your consumer to transact in your platform. Yeah.
Yeah, AI is going to be on both sides, right? And then once quantum kicks in, that's going to be fun as we approach.
Yeah, absolutely. But you
Yeah.
can imagine like the data that we are consuming across so many transactions that
Mhm.
we're talking about. A single transaction itself contains of hundreds of different fields, right? Where you're
Correct.
located, your IP address, your email address, where are you
Yeah.
buying from? I mean, all those kind of informations that currently there are still a lot of gaps that we can solve, and AI come into play to play the efficiency part. Yeah.
Fair enough. SheueChee, this has been really informative for me. Learned a lot about payments, and this discussion has been very fruitful. I think our audience is going to take a lot away in terms of learning how to upskill themselves, understanding more about payments, and getting more involved in the space. Thank you so much for
Right.
sharing about your journey, about Yuno, and about the payments world. We're delighted to have you and look forward to having you again in the coming months as your role grows with Yuno. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much, Shade, and really lovely having this opportunity. And thank you so much. Yeah.
Thank you. Audience, stay tuned for more interesting conversations with industry leaders in fintech, digital assets, and the Web3 world. Click like, subscribe, and follow us for more on Web3 fintech and digital assets.